9 CAT. Welcome to the show. Let's get into ways of working. Now, today we focus on work trauma, which is often dismissed as something we simply have to live with. We tell ourselves, at least, to keep pushing through the stress, meet the deadlines, survive the difficult workplaces, and to keep going, really, because in most cases we think, what choice do we have but to deal and endure with toxic environments at work? So let's unpack what this really means and how we can empower ourselves to navigate this rather damaging, for want of a better word, experience that we sometimes, unfortunately, often experience in our workplaces. Let me welcome my guest on the line, Mpho Ashley Motene, African psychologist trained in industrial psychology. Mpho, good morning to you. Welcome to the Journal. Nice to have you.
Good morning, Ernest. Thank you very much for having me today.
So this is a subject that, none of us are spared, unfortunately, when it comes to unpleasant
Mm,
experiences in the workplace environment. Now, many people separate mental health from physical health. Before we even get to how we solve workplace trauma, maybe let's just start right there. What is workplace trauma?
mm. So, workplace trauma, honestly, is any work experience that causes you to have a traumatic experience of either the people you are working with or the work itself in terms of how you are expected to work. Sometimes it is personal attacks. Uh, it can be physical, it can be emotional abuse, it can be manipulation or workplace bullying, even if it's not necessarily coming from a manager and coming from colleagues. But a lot of the time, it has to do with unrealistic work expectations that cause you to end up feeling all sorts of emotions, and physically your health takes a decline. You could be working in fear or with a lot of anger or with a lot of anxiety. So all of that is workplace trauma.
So many situations play themselves out differently. I would imagine
Mm,
many people experience it differently. But for many people, as I was saying, we separate mental health from physical health. Now, how does
mm,
unresolved work trauma actually manifest in the body? Would you say?
mm. Oh, it is that's such a valid point, because how it usually manifests physically, it could be feeling extremely fatigued or exhausted from trying to keep up with people's expectations that you are struggling to meet. And especially if it's coming from leaders within an organization, because of how that workplace has been set up culture wise, it can manifest as tension in the body, especially the neck and shoulders. Headaches, for example, but feeling like the stress is really trapped in your body in the way that it affects your concentration at work and even away from work. When you're trying to just live or relax, you're struggling to do that. It could even affect your sleep in such a way that you have panic attacks while you're sleeping, or anxiety attacks, for example. But anything really that feels like burnout, that is stress, that is so intense that you just feel like, I cannot cope with this anymore. And it can lead other people to feel hopeless or even emotionally numb, and they're just dragging themselves to work, just trying to keep their head down. But more than anything, cognitively, I would say it affects having to make so many decisions. So your brain ends up being exhausted, and your body follows suit, in a sense that you're too stressed to actually work or enjoy life.
So in other words, I mean, we can't separate mental health from physical health,
Mm-mm,
right? We should
not at
rather
all.
prepare ourselves in seeing the two as interconnected.
Yes, absolutely, because mental health is very much linked to the whole body experience of what your brain is sounding off as alarm bells to say, I'm not coping, I'm overwhelmed, this is too stressful, this is too much, and hence I will shut down certain parts of your body. It could be your ability to concentrate, like I said, or your ability to cope with what feels like normal work stresses, but they actually aren't, because it has the layer of trauma that could be linked to so many different sources. But microaggression tends to be the biggest one, just a thing of being mistreated simply because you're just trying to be yourself, perhaps different from the people who are instigating this type of aggression towards you. It could be because of the color of your skin, your abilities, whatever someone sees as lacking or too much to handle. That all manifests in mental health and being a big part of your physical health decline.
So is this something to be expected? I mean, if a young person is listening to our conversation now and
Mm,
readying themselves to get into the world of work, is this something we should prepare for? It sounds like such a nasty thing, for want of a better word, to say you're going into the
mm,
workplace, this is what you might just experience. Or are people just, some people just set out to be nasty to other colleagues for no apparent
mm.
reason?
I think both are equally true. So some people really are set up to be a bit more nastier in the way they interact with people in a way that is very harsh, unkind, and ultimately unloving if you just think from a human to human perspective. And it's interesting, we don't usually associate the word love with work because it
Mm.
almost seems unprofessional. But love is basically caring and kind action towards others. When that is not there, then it becomes part of the culture of a workplace or the way a business is being run. Sometimes it might be an entrepreneur feeling this or preparing as a young person to start business, and you actually realize that you're traumatizing yourselves by engaging with certain people or clients and so forth. And in the workplace, definitely it is something to prepare for because you never know if it might happen to you or not. And I'm not saying prepare for the worst, but know that it can happen and at least know what the signs are, which is everything that we have discussed. So to say, when you're starting to feel what feels like way more than stress, but feels like unfair treatment, that is actually work trauma. So prepare for it because at least you can manage it and deal with it. Although you can't change people, yes, you can report people. The laws of all the countries within Africa have allowance for that, but it doesn't always mean you will keep having a pleasant experience after that. So rather prepare for this type of situation should you be in it.
I like what you mentioned there, Paul, that people think love is separate from the work environment, right? There are many facets to love,
Mm,
and
yes.
love conquers all, right? I know it sounds cliched, but even in the work environment, to show love and compassion could make the
Mm.
place that much pleasant for everybody.
Yes, that is so true because I think when a workplace lacks compassion and love, you actually start realizing that what we would call psychological literacy, so the understanding of mental health and how your actions can actually affect another person as body, reality, and just life. In an everyday type of way is something that is then usually lacking. If there isn't enough psychological literacy, then you start to see that people either don't have enough self awareness or self compassion and love towards themselves, hence the way they would treat people like that. So, yes, it is something that we have to really strive to see more of in workplaces.
Now, for someone listening to us right now, and they've are going through this traumatic experience at work, but here's the irony: they're still working there.
Mm,
Which makes it even more
mm,
daunting, I would imagine, because
mm,
scarcity of work and so forth. This is the
yes.
same place that contributed to the trauma in the first place. How does
Mm.
the recovery process realistically look like for someone like that?
Mm. So within the workplace itself, there's always an option with human resource managers to report this as a grievance or a complaint to say that this is the type of treatment that I am experiencing, and can this please be investigated and can I please be supported so that there is fairness and it's not your word against the person who's instigating all of this work trauma in your direction. But more than anything, also realize there's a lot that you can do. Even a process like that can be emotionally draining because it's quite formal and all of that. But it is at least something that gives you comfort to know that in your workplace something can be done. And if not, I would say definitely seek counseling. outside of it, regardless of whether you lay a formal complaint or not. Sometimes fear prevents people from even attempting to do something about it within their workplace because they just feel like, I do not trust enough people here or believe that something can be done about it. But seeking counseling or even seeing a psychiatrist, counsel can be speaking to someone that you trust, be it a friend, but it can also be speaking to a psychologist or a registered counselor or social worker, just so that they can help you to calm down and realize that, oh, as much as all of this is happening to me, but one thing I can do here is definitely care for my body as best as I can, because it's about acknowledging that this is having an impact on it. It's about prioritizing sleep and recovery. It's about setting healthy boundaries,
Mm.
boundaries that help you to really understand that I can take a break and step away from this. My life cannot and should not be consumed by all of this, but the professional help definitely does help. Some people do need antidepressants because they've been that much affected, or anti-anxiety meds, for example, just so they can cope, especially if you cannot leave that workplace.
Yeah, I want us to get into. I mean, you've dealt with how, at least, some of the tips of how we need to navigate
Mm.
this rather toxic environment. I want us to get into how we, if we should at all, expect the workplace itself to change. We'll unpack that after the break. Please stay with us.
Ritmos e cultura. Com Jacob Tivani. Ora calorosas saudações, fiéis ouvintes do Ritmos e Cultura. Hoje celebramos não só a música, mas também a persistência, criatividade e paixão que continuam a inspirar gerações de músicos e ouvintes, não só em Moçambique, em África e no mundo lusófono. Ladies and gentlemen, senhoras e senhores, o conceituado Aniano Tamele in the building.
Mbilwini ka mina ku na thepu la ku pima hi lona ku va u ta swona swa ku ndzi ku rhandza kanjhani. Mbilwini ka mina ku na gezi la ku va ni ngela.
Ai! Ritmos e Cultura com Jacob Tivani. Todos os domingos, das 20 às 21 horas.
All right, the FIFA World Cup fever is with us, and it can only get hotter. You can also win big with SABC Plus. This FIFA World Cup season, you could win one of 4 PlayStation 5 consoles. It's simple. Download, register, play, and win. The SABC Plus app is available on both Android and iOS devices, so download it today. Head on to FIFA World Cup competition section, answer all the questions, and submit your entry. It's as simple as that. Don't miss out. Download the SABC app Plus now and start playing to win. T's and C's apply.
Ways of working on the channel.
All right, we continue with our discussion. My guest on the line is Mpho Ashley Motene, African psychologist trained in industrial psychology. Now, Mpho, I teased the question about, how do we deal with the situation, a toxic environment, whilst we're still working there. But I think a question to add, can this healing begin before the workplace itself changes?
Yes, I definitely do believe that. I myself am someone who has survived workplace trauma before. And one of the things that I realized when I got to a point of being so burnt out that I really was not sleeping well, although I was still working well, because you really want to still be working excellently based on your own work ethic and standards, maybe, but if not anxiety, perhaps. But one of the things that I realized is that the more I give myself space to rest, the more I find myself in spaces where I can talk about what I'm going through with someone who is safe enough to do that with outside of my workplace, the better it felt. The better I felt like there were pockets of joy sprinkled amidst all of that burnout and struggle and stress. I didn't like that I had allowed myself to feel that way. But then I got to a place with talking to a professional, realizing that Actually, this was also imposed. This was actually also directed at you. You were put in a difficult situation. It's not necessarily something that you have done wrong. If anything, you have been wronged. So, with that type of reframing, it really did help me to realize that I actually am recovering while in the background, I'm still looking for new work. And eventually, it took about 2 years only for me to get to a point where I could get another job. But during that time, I think the last year especially, I felt like, okay, I am well enough to even embark on a new career shift to a new organization. Yes, with fear of something like this happening again, in terms of being overworked and everything that was happening there as well. So, yes, recovery is possible while you are still in that same environment, as long as you're not trying to get the healing from the place that is also causing harm or causing you work trauma.
But just to add to that question, Paul, I mean, you can walk into a workplace and you have your
Mm,
first traumatic experience, and through engaging with one
mm,
or two fellow employees, and they tell you that this is how things are here. You have to suck it
mm,
up. Uh, do, do you then have a choice to run? Is that an option to say, you know what, this place is not for me? Or should it be your concerted effort to want to seek to change the place? You know what I mean? In other words, an old
mm,
saying comes to mind:
mm.
we need to choose our battles. Is that something that applies here?
Yes. Yes, that definitely does apply because as much as you can strive to change the culture and influence it in a better way, but it isn't necessarily your battle to win either. It is sometimes better if it comes at the expense of your mental health, if it comes at the expense of you potentially being fired and not being given a reference, for example, rather run. I would say do find alternative employment if you can. And that is such a hard thing in the context of Africa, knowing, like you said, that the scarcity of jobs is such a reality. But this thing of being expected to be thankful for work, even where you are getting the bare minimum, or if anything, you are being violated, should not be accepted. So definitely do look for something. Some people have turned to self-employment if it allows for it in your economy, but I do understand that it's not an easy thing to do if maybe you are needing that income or you are supporting others within your family and community who are relying on that income that you are earning. So, but definitely plan an exit. It is easier to wallow, but definitely plan an exit.
Wow, it's a hard fact to come to
Mm,
realize, but your health and life comes first as well. But I just want
mm,
to, if you can, just reiterate the fact that employers themselves do carry the accountability, or at least the responsibility, to ensure, once made aware that the environment is indeed toxic, it is their responsibility to ensure
mm.
that they address that, right?
That is very true and an honest assessment, especially because with employers, by law, you are expected to provide a fair, equitable, and safe work environment. That safety includes psychological safety and physical safety. If you are allowing and condoning an environment that causes work trauma for any of the people working in that, I think we can think of recent cases. Last year, we had Dr. Aluluto Mazri, for example, who collapsed at work and sadly passed away, having been denied sick leave. We don't know all the details, but it does definitely tell us that something is not right within a system. And the argument now is how much responsibility should an employer be taking? And I say as much as possible because you have said you wanted to employ this person. It is also your responsibility to make sure that their human right to dignity is not being violated in any way.
So just in closing, I mean, the recovery process can't just be minimized to taking a few days off work or a short holiday there. It's a deeper assessment and a self-care process that an aggrieved, for want of a better word, employee needs to undergo. It's not just a quick win, right?
Mm, that is very true. It isn't a quick win. Do prepare for a few months, if not years, of recovering. Sometimes you find that you have left that work environment, but trauma tends to echo in any shape or form in life. It does surface in new ways. You might find yourself overworking in a new job just to try and avoid being blamed for anything, or to try and avoid being put through a performance review, for example, if you've ever found yourself in that previously. But you also might err on the side of just being too defensive, or potentially aggressive as well, and how you end up being less compassionate or loving in the way you work in the future. So it can go both ways, but do prepare for a journey and give yourself the time. If you're finding that the anxiety is still creeping up and the fear of what if today something else happens, that is also okay. Or if you've set boundaries and you find that you're allowing others to overstep those boundaries, it is okay to give yourself some grace, knowing that at least being aware and increasingly aware of what you are needing to do differently, that is already half the battle won.
But a good and fair balanced assessment of self is also another thing to look at, right? Because just as you are complaining, you could actually be the problem yourself. All right, Mpho, quite an insightful subject matter. I'm sure we'll pick up in the not so distant future. But thank you so much for your time and insights. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Ernest.
All right, that's Mpho Ashley Motene, African psychologist trained in industrial psychology, talking to us about the traumas that come with a toxic work environment. The time right now, 29 minutes to 10 Central African time. Time now for Channel Africa Sport.
Sports on Channel Africa.
The African